What if the kid everyone ignored turned out to be the strongest of them all? What would you do if, on your first day at a new school, you were laughed at, targeted, and humiliated, all because you were different? Jaylen Carter, a 13-year-old African-American boy, had just moved to a bustling school in downtown Chicago. His dad was in the Air Force, so this wasn't Jaylen's first time transferring schools, but it was the hardest. Jaylen was intelligent, observant, and quiet, the type of kid who preferred books over loud conversations. But being the new kid made him a walking target for unwanted attention, and that attention came fast. In less than an hour after arriving, Blake Thompson, the loudmouth of 8th grade, had already set his sights on Jaylen. "Hey, new guy," Blake sneered as he walked past Jaylen's desk. "Don't worry, we'll go easy on you, unless you can't handle real schoolwork." His voice echoed, triggering laughter from a few nearby students. Jaylen didn't say a word. He sat still, eyes on his notebook. But inside, his heart was pounding. The shame, the heat rushing to his face. He wasn't new to this. New town, new school, new bullies, but each time still stung like the first. Jaylen had promised himself, no matter what, stay calm. Don't let them get to you. The class watched. Some kids whispered, others just stared. No one spoke up. Jaylen felt completely alone. That day, during lunch, he sat alone. Again. A few kids glanced his way, then looked away quickly. He could hear Blake laughing across the cafeteria, making some loud joke at Jaylen's expense. Jaylen stirred his food, appetite gone. He missed the quiet base school, the one where he had a few close friends who understood him. This place? It felt like walking through a storm alone. The next morning, Jaylen woke up earlier than usual. He had barely slept the night before. His thoughts kept circling, not about the schoolwork, but about how to face Blake again. In the hallways, whispers followed him. Some kids looked at him with curiosity, others with amusement, but no one really saw him. During English class, Blake struck again. This time, he waited for the teacher to leave the room for a moment. "Hey, Carter," Blake said loudly, pretending to whisper. "Bet you don't even know how to spell responsibility." The classroom erupted in laughter. Jaylen looked up slowly. He didn't respond. Again, silence. But this time, his eyes didn't dodge Blake's. He held the stare, calm but firm. Blake was waiting for a reaction, a flinch, a comeback, something. But Jaylen gave him nothing. At lunch, Jaylen sat under the oak tree at the edge of the schoolyard. A small notebook in his lap, he was sketching quietly, something he often did to calm his mind. Then came the voice again. "Didn't know tree-hugging and doodling counted as lunch now." Blake smirked, standing nearby with two of his friends. Jaylen closed his notebook without saying a word. He didn't even look up. His silence wasn't fear. It was discipline. One of the teachers, Mr. Alden, noticed the scene from afar. He didn't step in. Not yet. He had been observing Jaylen for a while, and was starting to understand that this kid was different, stronger than he seemed. After school, as Jaylen packed up his things, one student named Zach walked up to him. "You always that quiet?" he asked, not in a mocking way, but curious. Jaylen gave a half smile. "Not always. Just when there's nothing worth saying." Zach paused, then nodded. "Cool." That short exchange was small, but for Jaylen, it felt like a crack of light breaking through a storm cloud. Blake might still be laughing, but for the first time, Jaylen didn't feel entirely alone. The days went on, and nothing seemed to change. Every morning, Jaylen walked into class with the same quiet strength, and every day, Blake tried to chip away at that silence. "Yo, Carter, You get your mom to do your math homework again? Blake jeered during math class, loud enough for everyone to hear. A few students snickered. Others just looked away, pretending not to notice. Jaylen stayed focused on his notebook, drawing small symbols in the margin. He didn't flinch. Inside, though, it was different this time. Something had started to stir. Not anger, not fear, but resolve. Then came the breaking point. One Thursday morning, Mr. Jensen, the math teacher, wrote a complex problem on the board, one he called a real challenge. "Let's see who can solve this without a calculator," he said. The room buzzed with nervous energy. Blake immediately glanced at Jaylen and smirked. "Bet the quiet guy's already lost." This time, Jaylen moved. Slowly, but with purpose, he stood up. He didn't look at Blake or at the giggling classmates. He walked calmly to the whiteboard. The class fell silent. Even Blake froze for a moment. Jaylen picked up the marker. His hand didn't tremble. With careful precision, he began working through the problem. Step by step, line by line, every number, every function. Until finally, he placed the marker down and walked back to his seat. No words, no prideful glance, just quiet confidence. Mr. Jensen walked up to the board. His eyes scanned the solution. Slowly, he nodded. "Perfect. That's exactly right." A wave of silence washed over the room. Not awkward, but awed. Blake stared at Jaylen, but the smirk was gone, replaced by something else. Uncertainty. Jaylen didn't gloat. He didn't need to. He had said nothing. Yet somehow, he had said everything. After that day, something shifted. The next morning, when Jaylen walked into the classroom, the usual hush of awkward silence was replaced by quiet murmurs. But this time, they weren't mocking. A few students glanced at him with different eyes. Curious, maybe even respectful. Zach, the kid who had spoken to him once, gave Jaylen a nod as he passed by. That small gesture meant more than it looked. Even Blake, who sat a few rows back, was quieter than usual. He wasn't done picking on people, but something about Jaylen made him hesitate now. That day during gym class, Coach Daniels had everyone play basketball. Jaylen kept to himself at first, shooting quietly in the corner. Then Coach called out, "Carter, you're with Team Blue." Blake, who happened to be on the same team, groaned. "Great. Now we're definitely losing." But no one laughed this time, not even his usual backup. The game started. At first, Jaylen stayed back, passing the ball quickly, not wanting attention. But then, with his team trailing and seconds left on the clock, the ball found its way back to him. Jaylen paused. The court felt silent. Time slowed. He took a breath and shot. Swish! A perfect shot. The whistle blew. Tie game. His teammates burst into cheers. Someone slapped him on the back. Blake just stared at him, his arms crossed, face unreadable. But he didn't say a word. Later that afternoon, while Jaylen was grabbing his backpack, Blake walked by slowly. He didn't sneer. He didn't joke. He just muttered, "Nice shot," then kept walking. It wasn't an apology, but it was the closest thing to one. Jaylen didn't need Blake to become his friend. He didn't need the cheers or the praise. All he wanted was to be seen, not as a target, but as a person. And now he was. From that day forward, things at school were no longer the same. Jaylen no longer walked into a room filled with judgment or mockery. Instead, he was greeted with nods, quiet smiles, and even a few high fives. The boy who once felt invisible was now quietly respected. Not because he spoke up or fought back, but because he stood his ground with grace. Blake, on the other hand, started to change too, slowly. He didn't suddenly become kind or apologetic. but he began to observe more, speak less. One day in the library, Jaylen noticed Blake alone, flipping through a book on strategy and leadership. It was subtle, but it said a lot. As for Jaylen, he didn't try to become popular. He didn't start talking more or seeking attention. He remained himself, calm, quiet, observant. But now, his silence was no longer mistaken for weakness. In a school where being loud often meant being seen, Jaylen proved something else. That stillness, too, can carry power. Weeks later, during a class discussion about what makes a leader, Mr. Jensen asked for volunteers. Several hands shot up. Then, to everyone's surprise, Jaylen quietly raised his. When he stood up, the room fell silent. Not from awkwardness, but from anticipation. People wanted to hear what he had to say. Leadership, Jaylen said, isn't about being the loudest voice in the room. Sometimes it's about knowing when not to speak, and standing tall anyway. The class was quiet for a few seconds, then broke into gentle applause. Even Blake clapped, just once, but it was real. Jaylen didn't need to win over everyone. He didn't need to shout or fight or change who he was. He just needed to stand still and let his strength speak for itself. Have you ever faced bullying in silence and came out stronger? Share your story below. And if you believe strength comes in many forms, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more inspiring stories like Jaylen's. That's the end of part 1. Hope you've enjoyed the journey so far. If you're as excited as we are about what's coming next, make sure to follow the channel so you don't miss part 2. We've got so much more in store.